My name is Sammy.
Sammy,
Nice to meet
I'm
you, man.
Kevin. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Obviously, first thought, optimistically 100%. That's
Okay.
not true. That's
You
not
like,
true.
that's like, I want this to
I
be
want it to be
true.
true.
I like
100%.
optimists.
Like, ideally, it would be a very good utopia, the world would be,
Yes.
if everybody was good, but obviously it isn't, so there has to be some percentage of people who aren't good.
Yep.
Like, the first thing that went in my mind when I first thought of it, and I saw the percentages, was, well, a lot of things have to be proportional to each other.
Okay.
So, ideally 50-50. But
It's like the yin and yang thing. Yeah, you're like, oh, maybe it's like that.
But the thing about it is, it's like, well, what does it mean to be good? Like if someone's being selfish for their own gain, would you consider that good or bad? Most people consider that bad, right? But if it isn't negatively affecting somebody else, but only positively affecting them, now is it good or bad?
Yeah, and like, does the end justify the means?
Exactly.
Which, again, you have a lot of different opinions on that.
Because if the end is good, but the means is bad, then does that automatically, does a negative make a positive? Does a positive make a negative?
You could go down spirals and spirals and never actually come to a conclusion if you just base it on like human reason at some level, right? So, can humans actually determine good and bad?
That's why a lot of people go to religion.
Okay.
They automatically go to religion because they themselves don't feel well enough to do it. And so it's kind of a whole grasp on things. But as a human itself, discounting religion, can you tell what's good or bad? Then I think everybody has their own ethical means of what's good and what's bad.
Yes, everyone has opinions, and I really believe people are entitled to their opinions. I'm not going to say, oh, like, how dare you? Like,
yeah, for sure.
But there's 8 billion people in the world. There's probably 8 billion opinions at some level of good and bad. And we all have our biases and things, but they can't both be true. So like your definition of good versus my personal opinion of good is probably different, but doesn't mean one is better than the others, just on a human standpoint. So I don't think humans can determine good. I don't think governments can determine good because they change their mind all the time. And society, like here versus Asia, Africa, Europe, they have different views of good and bad. And we're in a global world that those can't do it. And I would actually argue we do need a higher power, not religion. I think there's a difference to determine this. Do you agree with that? Because I know you were hesitant of maybe a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of people, maybe relying on something higher than themselves is also good to save themselves out of like some sort of like negative thing that they're in. Because I know a lot of people who've gone to religion, and and like who said that saved themselves from them. But at the same time, I think it can also be like detrimental to somebody as well. Like
I've seen that too.
Might take them to a very dark path and away from the person they actually are or who were. And so when you say, do we need a higher power? Do we need a higher power? Was that a specific question?
Yeah, do we need the higher power? And maybe let's separate religion and higher power. So there are a lot of religious institutions in the world, and there's also religions, but I think it's important to separate because the higher power is often misrepresented in the institution. So they are two different things that we have to consider.
So would you consider?
So the higher power being the one who determines good and bad. Specifically that, not necessarily religious institutions, which what I think you've been more referencing.
Okay, so
do you believe in a higher power, and how would you define that higher power today, personally?
Personally, I don't think I believe in a higher. Yes, I do believe in a higher power.
Okay.
And how would I define that? Something I think that's greater than ourselves. To believe in something that's bigger than you are, you'd have to believe it's not only bigger, but also more powerful than you are. Okay. And in the case of a higher power, I feel like it had to have some connection to creation. Okay.
Yeah, because like this had to come from something.
Yeah.
What do you believe that there is one higher power? Or do you believe that there could be many, or do you believe in one specific one, or are you on the journey? Like, what part of the journey are you on of believing or following in any higher power?
Well, I feel like if you were to, I feel like if I knew a lot of science, I probably would answer this question pretty easily, but being ignorant as myself, I would say, I would assume there'd only be one, right?
Yeah.
How can there be something that can match something like that?
And if you look at all the, again, main world religions, because that's what you can go off of, they all contradict themselves. They cannot logically coexist. So I agree with you. There has to be one higher power. Do you think that higher power is knowable?
Higher power is knowable. So wait, is it something that we can know and understand, or is it something that can reveal itself to us?
Both. A little bit of both.
A little bit of both? On first thought, I would say no.
Okay.
Because it doesn't make, if it is higher than us and it's stronger than us, how would we be able to see it? Unless it matched us to
unless they revealed, which that's why I say answer both to it, in the sense that knowing something is a personal, individual act.
Yeah.
But because it's a higher power, I would agree with you that we cannot know this higher power unless they choose to reveal us.
Yeah.
So then the question is, does the higher power reveal itself to us? That's like kind of the crux of the question.
Now I have to answer you the question, why would it want to reveal itself to us?
It's a great question. And so we can't put our minds fully in this God, and we'll use the word God as well. Because the God, by definition of higher power, is above us, right? I would agree that they're greater than us, more knowledgeable than us and all.
Yeah.
But if we look at what the evidences of God, you mentioned even creation, I would actually argue creation is part of God's way to reveal himself to us. So that's one way.
Okay.
There's the other ways as well, and specifically, if you look at all the religions, they say they reveal through prophets, meaning people as messengers of God.
Yeah.
There's only one religion and one God that has actually come down to this world.
That's true.
Do you know which one that is? Or that claims to be which one?
Christianity.
Okay, yeah. Jesus is the only one that claimed to be God himself to actually come down. Yeah. You look at like Islam, you look at Hinduism, you look at Buddhism, they are all claiming that there's prophets, there's people that have God within them, but not necessarily God themselves coming down. Right. And so if we look at even historical, archaeological facts, all point to the evidence that there is nothing that proves it wrong about Jesus and about his claims, but on the contrary, it shows that Jesus did claim to be God.
Yeah.
And so whether you believe it or not is not going to be 100% of the people at this point in time. Yeah. Because it does take faith, it does take all those things. But Jesus very specifically came down and revealed himself to all mankind, not only through that 2,000 years ago, but through many spreading of his acts and his presence there. You kind of are smirking. What's your thoughts on Jesus even? Because I know it's jumping into it, but it's important what your thoughts are.
All right. Well,
and I'm not offended.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah.
I have to digest everything and I have to process everything. So, well, I mean, I don't negate the fact that Jesus is a symbol of peace and happiness. Okay. I mean, that's something that, like you go your entire life knowing for sure. But to claim, I mean, especially you label the claim there that there's archaeological facts and historical facts that lead up to the fact that maybe he that he probably was God, but like how can you then also say that those facts can be proven or those facts are real or that we, for instance, know those facts to a T? Yeah,
that's fair, and I think it's a good question to ask because I actually don't want people to just believe because I tell them to, because I think that's kind of foolish. Jesus even said, in the Bible, count the cost before you jump in. Don't just believe blindly. But so some evidence, for example, the Roman Empire. Do you believe the Roman Empire?
Of course I do.
Yes, thank you. Good. I've seen the walls and stuff.
I do know he's the most research person in the
and there's, but more specifically, these guys like Josephus and Tacitus, these guys aren't followers of Jesus, because you can't make the argument of they're biased, all this. They were actually on the other side, and they not only testified of his miracles, but also testified of his claims to be higher than just a person or a prophet. Again, it's a claim thing.
I like that you didn't say he claimed to be God, because I don't think he ever claimed to be God. I think in different wording, he claimed to be something higher than prophecy.
Okay, but what's higher so specifically in John 8, it's an interesting verse, but if it says, if you do not believe that I am he, you'll die in my sins. Which, if you read that, you're like, whatever. But the word I am in the Hebrew and Greek is the same word that God used at the burning bush way back when in the Old Testament. Are you familiar with that story? So God said, or Moses said, what is your name? And God says, I am. That's the same name that Jesus used. Then later in that same chapter in John 8, he says, before Abraham was, I am. And Abraham was the father of the faith, and I am, again, it's that same word of that he's claiming to be the name of God. Right after that, all of the religious leaders who knew exactly what he was saying started trying to stone him.
For sure.
Not because of anything else, but as soon as he said, before Abraham was, I am, this claim that he was God was what set them off. And there's other passages as well. we can't though. So I would argue he very clearly claimed to be God. Whether you believe in him or not, that's a separate aspect. But if you look at the text and even the extra biblical text, he claimed to be more. I would actually argue that Jesus cannot be just a good person or a symbol of peace, because he claimed to be so much more, and he claimed to and warn people of things. So he's either a liar, like he straight up lied to people and somehow manipulated to show miracles. He's a lunatic, meaning he actually believes he's God and he's not. Or he's the Lord, he's actually God. Because if he was just a good teacher, why did he say a lot of those things he says, and why did people kill him for being a good teacher? So that's why I would argue you can either do one of those three things.
I don't think you can call him a liar, for instance. Like,
I agree with that.
If a madman walks here and says the world's ending, but he really believes the world's ending,
he's a lunatic.
He's a lunatic, but he's not a liar.
That's true, and that's why it's either liar, lunatic, or he's the Lord, actually, who he is, who he says he is. Because many people in America especially are like, oh, he's just a nice guy, I like his teachings. But really what people are doing, they pick and choose the teachings he teaches.
I mean, it's like you said, he's never explicitly said he's God, but interpreting the words that he said, it's like the only point you can kind of make is that it labels to that, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, something I've always thought about, because I've heard people bring this up, is like, what if he isn't saying that he is God, but he's saying he's at the level of God? And so therefore, like, when he says those stuff that you said, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's indicating that he is, but rather that he is of the level, because we know at the end, because it's in the Bible, at the end of times, he's going to be coming down. He's the one who's going to be establishing.
Yes, and every knee will bow before him.
Bow before him, and that's kind of like what I had in mind. If he's at the same level, that's why everybody's bowing before him, right? Ooh. So does it have to be that he is God, or why can't it just be that he's at the same level of God?
So there is only one God, in the Old Testament talks about that a lot. God, there's either, if you look at it this way, John 1:1 talks about this. It says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. If you read the context, it's very clearly the Word is referring to Jesus himself in many ways. So if you look at it even logically as a T-chart, if you will, there's either creator or they're created. And so Jesus in the book of John and Colossians 1 and other passages in the Bible says that he is the creator. If you're the creator, you can't be created, if you will. And there's only one God and one creator. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And so if we were to say that Jesus was not God, one, the Bible would have to be thrown out because it's said throughout. Two, for us to be, and this goes to what Jesus was doing on the earth, he wasn't just teaching and doing miracles, he came to die for the sins of the people. If Jesus was not God, he would not be perfect, because there is only one God, one perfect. If Jesus was not perfect, he was not a worthy sacrifice, meaning I cannot die in your place in light of God's wrath, because I deserve to be punished myself, because I've messed up. I've lied, stolen, fights, all these things. If God is not perfect by very nature, he cannot take another person's place, because he would have to deserve the wrath. And so a lot of things hinge on the fact that he is God. So I would actually argue this is a non-negotiable in a sense of the message of God and the Bible. But what I'm curious, like, what's your hesitation of why it's so challenging to believe? Is it just like so far-fetched that God would come in human flesh, or what's kind of the stick that's having you hard to grasp it?
I mean, real quick before I answer that question.
Yeah, sure.
I have it in the back of my head, but like real quick before that, you mentioned that he is perfect. And obviously, that was one of the points you mentioned to indicate that like it points to God and stuff. But so, in your eyes, the only thing that can be perfect is God.
So for example, humans can do good, and so, but as a human entity, and I'm not talking about like the created nature and that stuff, but as a humans, no one can be actually perfect. And when we say perfect, you do have to look at the standard being God is perfect, so no one can be like God.
So perfection sacrificed itself, therefore mankind was saved.
So God took the weight of our sin, past, present, future, on his son Jesus, the perfect one. 2 Corinthians 5:21, there's a verse, it says, "He who knew no sin became sin for us, so that we can become the righteousness of God." So Jesus, in a sense, took on our sin, and God's wrath that was supposed to be going on you, me, and all humanity was placed on Jesus.
And this is kind of where I want to bring it all back to the question you asked initially. How can I believe one man is truly perfect, 100%?
Okay, that's a fair point. Because the reality is you and I have never experienced it, right?
That's true.
So believing something without having exact evidence of it is hard. So I acknowledge that. It all hinges on if Jesus is God. That's the only way it could, because it sounds lunacy to say that a man was perfect.
Yeah.
I agree with you. But because he was a God-man, if you will, that he was God in the flesh, that's the only way that in my brain even, and this is, God didn't do it for Kevin's brain, but that's the only way that this could rationally work, is that God himself. And Jesus, right before he died on the cross, because Jesus not just physically suffered, he was separated. He had the full wrath of God on himself as God in human flesh. He says, if there is any other way, he said, let this cup pass before me, aka let this wrath pass away from me. And he even was like sweating and like blood, like showing the human distress, because that's a human distress signal. And so God wasn't like, oh, like I'll just do it because I woke up on the nice side of the bed. Like, this was the only way that he could show his love for all of humanity, and the only way that we could be not under the wrath of God was through this. So
all those points you bring up to further, like, you know, like show that he was truly perfect, and being perfect can really only be God's thing. Yeah. So therefore, he must be an entity of God. That idea of perfection that you instill onto Jesus Christ, you only, that idea of perfection, it's only within, like, I guess the context of Bible's idea of perfection, is it not? Like if you, like, for instance, if another person has another idea of perfection and you look at Jesus Christ and say, well, he's not perfect in my eyes.
Yes.
It can only, the idea can only exist unless you believe in the Bible.
Fair point. And that's why we started with what is the standard of good and bad, because that is, and this is where, like, understanding people's worldviews, because we might be coming from different worldviews, so we might be talking about this point, but we actually should be talking about this point. And so that's why I think it's important to start with this type of point, because if we don't understand at least the other person's perspectives on what is good and bad, you can't even really talk about Jesus at some level, because it hinges on what is good and evil and who is the arbiter of good and evil. And so, yes, it would fall apart in that, but like we even established before, there can't be two sets of morals. There's one absolute truth and one absolute evil. If you disagree with what's different, he might not be good in some people's eyes.
And this is where I think, in terms of, like, argument-based, it gets a little hectic, because if I was to say that's not true, you can have more than one set of morals, then that also mean I'd have to, you know, like, accept a lot of other different morals, which
by definition it's relative morality, and then you cannot say anything is good and bad. See, it's kind of a circular conundrum of, one, absolute morality is the only rational way to explain life, morality, and things, regardless of which standard that is. That there has to be one. But then the question is, what is that one? What God is the true one? What is the one that has revealed himself?
So you would claim that if I thought there was only one set of morals, but I also did not believe in a religion, that I would be irrational?
Not necessarily, because you could rationally believe in another set, but I don't think relative morality is rational. If that makes it clear up. Because there are a lot of other religions. I mean, I was just in India and I talked to people from Muslim backgrounds. Like, I enjoy it and I value those people, but we can't both coexist as both being correct. We can value them as humans and talk to them without screaming at them or whatever, but they can't both be true. Do you think, like, so is this idea that Jesus being God, is your struggle really on the fact that he can't be perfect, or is there something deeper that, like, is that the core? Okay.
That's one idea.
Okay.
It's like, I mean, like obviously, I understand the whole point bringing God to the flesh.
Okay.
As in, like, it's just his spirit inside of him, inside of the body of a man, birth from a virgin.
Yeah.
Birth.
Pretty unique.
Yeah, you know. Like, I don't know. I just feel like it's something I'd read in a book, not something, you know, I'd like exist in the world of. Like, for instance, born of a virgin birth. Like, I'm assuming you weren't always Christian, or were you Christian?
No, I was not always professing it. There was a time I was like agnostic. I did grow up learning about Jesus and stuff, but I didn't until I was 18, right before I went to college, is when I first started following Jesus.
When you heard about the virgin birth, what was your initial reaction to it?
I mean, as an elementary kid, you're just like, well, that's weird. Definitely in high school, I would think of like, I can't even fathom that. Honestly, still today, sometimes I'm like, how does that even work biologically? I don't claim to know exactly what I can't explain it because it's supernatural at some level. It can't be explained in biological terms per se.
All right. Okay.
And that's, again, maybe as a higher power and what I believe is one God, by definition, they are able to do the supernatural.
Right.
And so in my brain, at least, it's rational to say there's things that I may not fully understand that I can believe because he is a God that can do the supernatural. There are times where I'm like, I wish I understood this more, but I've also seen supernatural things happen. And so, like, I've seen evidences of supernatural in the present day, which has given me more faith of what supernaturally happened 2,000 years ago, if that makes sense. What's your background like? How do you grow up, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, you know, I guess I just grew up, I guess. I don't know.
You screwed up a lot, or what?
Yeah, you know, I mean, as any regular person goes through, regular screw-ups, regular things. I don't think I had anything like different or special compared to the people.
Okay. What kind of faith background, any that your parents had, or? No. It's kind of like, were they more agnostic, atheists, or just like ignored religion altogether? That
more of a ignorance type thing.
Yeah,
I guess I never really thought about it when I was younger until, I guess, around college time.
Yeah, that makes sense, and I've known people like that. And yeah, for me, I mean, I grew up in the church, and I was at every event, and even went to a Christian school. But then in high school, I was, in retrospect, I was very angry at God, religion, all those things. I was in a school that was really harsh. I was with, like, I had injuries, I had diabetes, all these things I blamed on God. I turned to drinking, partying, girls, did a lot of screwed up stuff to hurt a lot of people. But really what drew me back to even considering God, because that was pretty much just fun and entertainment money and death. And I almost died someday. It was crazy. I saw people that believed in God. Right before college, I went on a trip that they knew I was this crazy person that rejected God. They loved me so much and without condition. And that, to me, I was like, whatever they have, like, I want that genuine empathy, love that they were showing me. And that made me, and they pointed me, well, this is what Jesus does. I was like, Jesus is just this like lightning bolt guy who's coming to judge us. Then I started reading the Bible for myself and considering these things at age 18. And I was like, that's the love I want, and that I've been taught, but I didn't realize. And so to me, the love of the people around drew me to consider who God is, and this message that Jesus came to die for us, to be separated and under the wrath of God for us, past, present, future, was so radical of a love that I was like, that's worth living for. Because my drunkenness, my screw-ups, my girl, like the girl, it's empty. Like, I just wanted more. And so that's a little bit of my story of how I grew to it. But then after I got saved, my first 4 years in college, I read like the Quran, the Hindu Vedas, all these things, because I was like, if I'm actually gonna make this about my life, I want to know this is actually true, not just because of an experience, because experiences can be deceiving. So that's a little bit about your story. Yeah.
I mean, when you also mentioned that, like, sometimes you do things and you feel like it's God guiding your path, your way there. And, you know, when one dude gets out of bed and he decides to brush his teeth instead of go taking a shower first, or when someone, let's say, chooses to procrastinate, whereas the other decides to start studying immediately. I perceive that more as just somebody, just rather not in terms of God guiding the way to that path, but rather somebody just making that decision for themselves through, I would say, more like natural instinct. So how do you know that a lot of the things that you say God might have done for you was rather a natural instinct that you perceived as God because you believe that, let's say, it doesn't have to be that second point I'm about to make, but like, because you believed that, like, for instance,
so
you needed someone to.
And it's a good point and clarification that I need to bring too, that I might not have communicated well. There are some people that might believe like, oh, the Spirit leads you every decision. I believe that God has given us free will, and so I don't ask God which cereal to eat. I do at some sense, like, the Lord gave us freedoms to choose that. So yes, there is an aspect of the human, like, it's the nature versus nurture concept as well, which is important to consider. I don't think it's one or the other. I think it's both. That, yes, in the book of the Ezekiel in the Bible, kind of as an analogy, it says that God takes our heart of stone and gives us a new heart so that we can follow in His ways. And I look at that as that God transformed my heart, my nature, if you will. I still was Kevin, but He then gave me free will in this new life that He has given me to then choose. And so, yes, there are Christians that follow Jesus that may not go down the same path as me. I'm not judging that one is better than the other, but there is that free will aspect. But to say that it was just a human nature to just a radical change or even a over time change, the things that have happened in my life, and I could go into many stories, I didn't naturally just, like, it isn't human nature to do some of the things I did. It had to be of God. So, I understand you can make that argument against God, but I would say that the evidence is that God was not only involved, but the centerpiece is more than the possibilities of a human just doing it.
Well, I mean, in terms, when you mention free will, obviously, now that, like, God doesn't control everything, acknowledging God as our designer, sorry, real quick, I do believe God is in control of all things. He knows all things, but He does still give us free will. I think they can coexist. Okay.
They can coexist.
He gave us free will, and so it is our will to make choices and act on instinct, right? Where do you think that instinct comes from, that choice decision comes from? It's part of our biology, I know, but like, where does it come from, if not?
I would say it's God, because He created us. He created like who we are as humans, even a conscience, and that. But I think there is a nurture aspect as well, because we cannot avoid the truth that we are influenced by how we are raised. So there is that nature versus nurture coexisting, influencing at the same time.
Right.
Does that answer the question?
Okay. It was a small question.
What would you say, because these are good questions and clarifying, what would you say would cause you to believe in, like, this one God? Like, what's in your journey, in your view of, like, this higher power, what would it take for you to believe in?
A miracle.
Miracle, okay.
I know, I mean, I feel like that's the way most of the people who have been given prophets and prophecies have been shown the truth through miracles, right?
Yeah.
What makes us so unimportant compared to the people who have gone through those prophet times and those miracle times? Why such a small gap in between all of them, and then such a long gap now until end of times?
Yeah, and I do believe miracles still exist. But if you did get a said miracle, whatever that looked like, because we can't necessarily demand God to do this.
For sure.
So if you saw a miracle and you saw that, you recognized that it was God, would you actually follow that said God? What would your response be theoretically after that miracle, do you think?
You can't deny Him at that point.
Okay. So you would, like, genuinely, okay, you got to be real. I'm following you.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason not to, unless you actively, because if it's real, then there's an idea of hellfire and there's an idea of heaven. Following Him leads to heaven, following away from Him leads to hell.
It seems Pretty easy decision. Okay. And I think that's important to clarify, because a lot of people that have that same reasoning of needing a miracle, when I ask them that question, they often say, well, I would have to test him out.
Well, you already tested him.
Yeah, because of a miracle. But what it comes down to is it's an authority issue. That they actually don't want to follow God unless they follow their set of morals and what is good, which you're not at, so I'm not projecting, which I think actually is a good thing, that you're not like rejecting God's authority, you're struggling with the existence, if you will. Is that a fair summary?
You can say it's a fair summary.
Okay. What have you ever like tried to know God in your journey in your life at all? Or have you been more passive in the sense of, well, if he shows the miracle, then I'll do it? Like, has there ever been a active pursuit of knowing God?
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I was about to... well, I mean, it depends on really what you think about pursuit. I mean,
that's a good point.
One kind of pursuit could be actively searching religions and looking through each text for it, right? But then another kind of pursuit, well, one could suggest be another kind of pursuit is soul searching, for instance. You know, like being with yourself and like trying to think, is there really something that I want to do following something or not?
Yeah.
So
have you done either of those?
I think yes. I would say I've done some soul searching for sure.
Okay. Have you done the religious or like the other gods and?
Well, I can't really say I've done it too much or much at all.
And that's fair. It's not to cast judgment, just curious. And I was even just talking to someone recently that if we want to know ourselves and what you call like soul searching, I don't think that's necessarily inherently bad, because I still am learning myself and I'm 33 years old. Like, because it's like, oh, I didn't know that was in me, or that thought, or those things. There's aspects of God that we can find by studying his creation, in the sense of the human being and nature even itself. But at the end of the day, we're almost searching for the wrong thing, and we're going to only see a glimpse of the real entity. Does that make sense?
I get that.
And so I would actually encourage you and all people, and really this is, I'm not here to bash people.
Yeah.
Most people don't even consider that they can know God or that they can actually pursue that knowledge. So I would encourage you is seek out to know God. There's this verse in the Bible, Jeremiah 29:13. It says, if you seek me with your whole heart, you will be found by me, which is interesting in the text, because it's, yes, we are searching for God, but he is also searching and pursuing us. In the New Testament, it says, draw near to me and I will draw near to you. God doesn't force people to know him. He doesn't force people to like, believe me, or like he's not this hellfire guy that I'm talking about. Yes, there is a hell. Yes, there is a judgment. But he is wanting every single person to know him. He revealed himself through Jesus, but he also reveals himself today through other people like myself, like those people I met, through the Bible, that he revealed himself that is not just a 2,000-year-old book, it's the living word of God. And so, yes, miracles do happen. I've seen that. I've seen people literally go from the brink of death to life. I've seen people healed from things. I've seen all these things. He doesn't always do it that way. Even myself, I didn't believe in Jesus through a miracle. I believed in Jesus because people represented him well, and they pointed me to the Bible that I read, and I found Jesus. I saw miracles later that I would say strengthened my faith. But he's calling you and all of us to come and know me. And his arms are open, but we have to want to know him. And then the question begets is, do we actually want to know him? Do we value knowing God higher than really anything? So what would you think about that? Like, do you actually value knowing God?
I'd like to say I do, but realistically, maybe not as much as I think I do.
Okay, that's an honest and humble answer. Thank you. And this is not a call to run to the hills and don't like drop out of school, so don't get that. But during your time at studies, as you're studying all these classes, the reality is college students have time. We have 30 minutes of time a day. Is starting that pursuit, because I really believe what we value will show in how we use our time.
That's true.
Whether we like it or not, it's what happens. Some seasons of exceptions, but I would challenge you, because I really believe that if we seek God, to know if he's true, to say, God, if you're real, show me. He will show us in various ways, sometimes through miracle, sometimes through the Bible, sometimes through other people, or sometimes all of them. But God is in the business of wanting to know people, and he wants to know you. He loves you, despite you I don't even know if he's real. I know it sounds weird. I laughed the same way when someone told me that, because I'm like, I hate him. I literally, multiple times, God, I hate you. But then they say, I love you, and I laughed. But he genuinely loves you. And he showed that through Jesus. He shows that through even giving you life each day, giving you more opportunities to consider him. Does that make sense?
I guess that makes sense, yeah.
And what I would encourage you, just on a real practical level, pursuing God is, you can talk to God even if you don't believe they exist. And before I got saved, I said, God, if you're real, you got to show me, or else I'm out. And he did. He answered that prayer, even though I hated him at the time I was talking to him. Secondly, read the Bible. Have you read the Bible before, ever?
Occasionally I'll scroll on Instagram and I'll find a person talking about it first.
Okay, but I would say even the actual book, if you read even the story of Jesus, you're going to see that this book has drastic claims different than any other historical books, that it's a way of life. And then third is talk to other Christians. Pick their brains of why do you, even what you've been doing today, which I appreciate. Why do you believe what you believe? How do you know that was God? Those are valid and great questions, and I hope you even ask more. So I would say pray, read the Bible, and talk to other Christians and pick their brains to see why they believe what they believe. That's part of the pursuit of knowing God. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair.
Cool. Thank you for the conversation, man.